Now, Locke's state of nature is sounding like quite a nice place to be from this perspective. It's sounding like a pastoral utopia where everybody uses their God-given reason to decide what should belong to everyone and respect everyone's rights. But Locke wasn't quite so naive. The state of nature can break down into a state of war. And the state of nature wasn't the same thing as a state of war as they were for Hobbes. You could have wars in a state of nature just as you could have between states. Wars for Locke was an exception to the natural order. In Hobbes, there isn't one war and then another war. There's just constant war. It's the stuff of life in a state of nature. The only work anyone has in a state of nature, as I said, is as a soldier. Locke also believed that some war was justified. His own doctrine of natural rights meant that war could be legitimately waged if people's natural rights were at stake, which they usually are in war. Wars tend to involve killing and enslaving and plundering, so you've got an infringement of all three of Locke's natural rights there: the right to life, liberty, and property, all come under the threat from war. And war, Locke believed, authorized people to do likewise in defense and retaliation. War authorized people to kill, to plunder, and to enslave as well. And we'll get onto that last one a bit later. There's also some significant differences between the two thinkers in how they say the government, once it is instituted, should be structured. For Hobbes, if you remember, the prime virtue of a state is unity. That's what the sovereign is for. If you remember that picture from last time, the front illustration of Leviathan's first edition, the huge Leviathan is made up of lots of different citizens, but they're all grouped together into one body when the king is added as the head. Instead, Locke, very influentially in some ways, conceived of government not as unified around one person, but as essentially distributed amongst different parts. He was very influential in conceiving of a just government as being divided up into different branches. And these branches must be at least partially independent. There's what we call a separation of powers, where each keeps check and balances the other. And he called these branches the executive, the legislative, and the federative. We now more commonly say the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. That's how it works in most state constitutions. The legislature makes the law, the executive executes the law, makes decisions of state, and the judiciary applies the law to individual cases. Locke's federative was for foreign policy. It's like the Foreign Office, say, or the Diplomatic Corps, or something like that. But we don't need to worry about that. And again, something else, unlike Hobbes, Locke wrote about the need for religious toleration. This is something else that they quite sharply diverge on. John Locke wrote a separate pamphlet called An Essay on Religious Toleration. It was a time of massive persecution of religious minorities, Protestant against Catholic and Christian against Jew. And so this was quite radical, saying maybe we should have a society where all these positions are tolerated. You don't have to agree, just let them be. Allow freedom of conscience. And he pointed out that changing people's beliefs by force was not just wrong, perhaps, but it was also actually impossible. You can't do it. If you chain someone up and hit them over the head, you can get them to say something different, but you can't actually get them to believe something different. It doesn't work. Belief isn't voluntary in that sense. Hobbes, on the other hand, thought that there should be a single state controlled church, a bit like the Church of England, with a single state religion, a creed, which everyone would obey. but like the Church of England, but very much decided by government and admitting no rival to the hearts and minds of subjects. So these are various other ways in which the two thinkers disagreed.